They re anxious to head out so we can make it to Mos Eisley before nightfall. It's going to be slow going dragging that overloaded sled behind your old speeder. The older man nodded silently. His brow furrowed with unspoken concern. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. A mixed roaring of both the new energy blades and the older mechanical cutting claws rebounded from the frozen walls and ceiling as the crews scraping the base layout from the ice continued their work. The newer digger models used energy blades that vaporized the ice on contact, but there were only 2 of those and funding wasn't there for more. The older diggers were far cheaper and easier to come by and were equipped with long rows of spinning durasteel blades which ground deeper and deeper into the ice walls as it advanced. All the while, a fine spray of ice shards was ejected from beneath them until the repulsor bins attached below were sufficiently loaded. When they were, a small sensor within the bin activated an alarm on the operator's datapad console as the cutter was automatically disengaged and the digger shut down. Once released from the main vehicle, the robotic bins wound their way through the tunnels and hangars of the slowly growing rebel base to the outside. As they traveled, the container full of ice shards was slightly heated and compressed, and then allowed to refreeze in the frigid hot air, creating large ice blocks. These were then deposited for ground crews outside the base before the bin returned to its digger. The blocks were then used for creating ice walls around lookout posts and along the fronts of the defensive trenches. This small piece of Hoth was slowly and begrudgingly giving up the shelter and storage they needed to house the rebel forces. Leia watched as one of the robotic bins returned from the main hangar level above, reattaching itself to its digger which immediately resumed cutting. Progress is being made, Mon Mothma, but perhaps not as fast as we might like. The crews are working non-stop in shifts, but most of the equipment is outdated. They can go much faster. The princess was nearly shouting to be heard over the noise. Mon Mothma's aide, Alia, who had been standing quietly between the 2 women, took a step back so as not to block the eye line between the 2 leaders. The slightly graying, more mature rebel leader responded slowly, carefully selecting her words. I have no doubt they are working as quickly as they can. Leia, and I am sure the base will be completed soon. However, my time here grows short. I must soon return to the rest of the command fleet. Admiral Akbar has quite a task trying to keep a group of ships that large from being discovered, and there is work still to be done bringing new systems and resources to our cause. Leia was watching Mon's face as she spoke. There's something else. Something you're not saying. What is it? The older woman cut her eyes quickly away to the ice-shredding machines. Walk with me. Leia, she turned to her aide, raising a gentle hand in the air. A private moment please, Alia. This will only take a moment. Alia bowed her head and stepped back. Of course, milady. Her eyes followed them as they turned to walk out into the privacy of the hallway. Thankfully the dim corridor was a bit quieter, affording them a calmer exchange. Mon glanced back into the room to see Alia taking an interest in the cutter machines and talking with the crew. The noise level in the adjacent room was sufficient to cover their conversation anyway. She turned to face Bail Organa's daughter. I hear Commander Skywalker has disappeared again, Mon. I am aware of this as is General Reek. I know Leia. I know. I do not question your ability to lead, but I am quite concerned with our newest commander. There is no debating that his actions at the Battle of Yavin saved us all, and the rebellion. And yes, I know he has left us to further his understanding of the Jedi way, Leia cut in. In order to be a more effective opponent of the Empire, Mon Mothma took a few steps away, looking off down the corridor, far away as if looking into another time. She took a moment to draw in a slow breath from the frosty air, and then exhale deeply. What troubles me is not his current absence, it is the ghosts of the past that he and his antique Jedi weapon have resurrected within me. It could be brought to bear on us as it once was many years ago against the members of another group. He wields his lightsaber for good, but that weapon has caused more agony, anguish and turmoil than you may realize. Seeing it on our young commander's belt raised the hair on the back of my neck. Leia. That name, that weapon, we must be certain. We must be certain of his intentions, and he must be watched closely going forward. His name. Why do you fear him so? Asked Leia. He was led to us by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Surely he knew what he was doing and was a powerful enough Jedi to see a favorable future with Luke on our side. I have known General Kenobi for many years, and I am confident that he had only our best interests in mind where Commander Skywalker is concerned, but, it wouldn't be the first time he put too much faith in a pupil." She dropped her gaze to the ground, again choosing her words very carefully as she danced around the painful truth and past she and Leia's parents had fought so hard to keep hidden. She mentally worked to bury her thoughts, her emotions. They could be read all too easily. "Leia, for all that you know of the birth of the Empire and the Rebellion, there is much that you do not. There are only a handful who knew all the entanglements and complexities surrounding the descent of the Republic into the darkness cast by the Empire. Most of those who do are now dead, leaving only myself and one or two others. Trust me when I say it is neither a weight that can be shared with you at the present time, nor a mantle you would want to be burdened with. As a bit of a Force sensitive myself, I can tell you that the ebb and flow of the Force can pull strongly to dark areas we may not wish to go. Vader and his Emperor are both ruthless and must be stopped at all costs. We cannot risk losing young Skywalker to that dark path. Watch him closely. He could be our salvation, but if he turns, he could also be our undoing." The last of Mon Mothma's comments lingered in the air, increasing in weight as the moments passed. Suddenly that silence was interrupted by a hideous roar, immediately followed by screams and blaster fire coming from the room they had just left. Both women turned abruptly to look. Bright flashes and the sound of more blaster fire was immediately followed by first one, and then several from the ice-cutting crew running out of the room into the corridor toward them. Another loud howl echoed off the walls. The running troops stopped just short of where Leia was standing and turned, dropping to one knee, leveling their blasters. One of the ice cutters ripped off his goggles and turned his red face to the startled women as he powered on his blaster. "There's ice creatures in there." One of the cutters broke through into a natural ice cave behind one of the walls. When it pulled back to take a look, they came pushing through. "Let us get you both out of here," insisted one of the troopers, attempting to herd Leia and Mon Mothma away to safety. "Where is Alia?" screamed Mon wide-eyed. "Where is my aide?" The trooper turned to her grimly. "One of them took her, back into the cave. We tried to stop it, but it grabbed her and was gone." It all happened so fast. More howls rolled down the corridor as one of the beasts made its way into the hall. A flurry of blaster fire erupted, bright crimson flashes illuminating the dim space, as the creature howled louder before stumbling to his knees and crashing dead. Face first to the durasteel floor grates. A second of the huge beasts burst through the opening, followed by a third. "Retreat," yelled one of the cutting crew as they stood up and turned to run. Chapter 33 Enter the Sandman. Blade looked quickly to the left, then the right and exited the small room into the hall of the Dowager Queen. Two Jawas leaning against the dusty wall several doors down stopped their jabbering and turned to watch him go, their amber eyes piercing the blackness of their cloaked faces. Their gaze then moved slowly to the still open door he had come from. His auburn-haired shadow, Sabella Arlen, slid into the narrow gap between the door and frame he had vacated, watching him go. As the doors of the turbolift closed with him inside, she silently disappeared behind the closing door of her room, echoes of their brief conversation playing over in her head as she leaned back against the inside of the door. It clicked shut and she locked the heavy bolt. She needed to know more about Caird and Guri before heading to the spaceport to meet 1265. If they were tailing Blade's group, she needed more information. She thought about him again. Arden Drone, aka Blade. He didn't want her to follow, he wanted her to be safe. The more she thought about it, the less she could fight the smile creeping across her face. He was worried about her. She went to watch, leaning toward the window pane, her face pushed into the musty, diaphanous curtains that hung to the floor. As he walked away into the masses on the sandy street below, a bent, hooded figure bumped into him in the street. Reflexively she jumped, but the stranger retreated immediately, bowing and apologizing. Flipping the safety back on, her hand moved slowly off the grip of her blaster and she relaxed as Blade disappeared into the crowd. The door to our building slid open, and Gurinden entered. Trailed by a crusty, weathered old man in a hooded cloak with desert wraps covering his body and face, and dark goggles shielding his eyes. Rogue and Felth looked up from their seats at the holonet console. As the door slid shut behind their snitch, Gurinden began speaking in squeaks and squawks as Rogue motioned for him to wait. Hold on. He reached inside his helmet. Turning on the translator and switching to broadcast speaker mode. He looked back at his Kuba's spy, nodding for him to continue. The translated voice came from the helmet speakers. I have found your guide, sir. For years he has claimed to have knowledge about the location you seek. Gurinden stepped aside, bringing the man forward. Rogue looked him over. Who are you? The old man lifted and pushed back his hood, then pulled down the wraps from his face, revealing a leathery, crease and wrinkle-ridden face, and a thick head of stark white hair. He grabbed his goggles, pushing them up into the snowy tangle, revealing two ice-blue eyes that stood out against his dark, tanned skin. Most folks around here call me the Sandman cause I generally live outside the towns, out in the sand. Why don't you call me Sandy? It'll make things easier. Rogue stood up. Okay Sandy, I am Rogue. Why don't you tell me what you know about the place we're looking for? The old man got a twinkle in his eye, and a slight smile crept onto his face, only the very corners of his mouth turning up slightly. The place you seek hides from everyone. He looked off vacantly into a scene from his mind's eye, a sandscape from somewhere in his past travels. It sends instruments reeling, readings spike and fall off, and false headings breed confusion. The first time I found it completely by accident, after a sandstorm. An entrance was revealed to me when the sea shifted. I quickly noted the rock landmarks, and it's a good thing, because another storm blew through soon after, covering the entrance I had found while simultaneously revealing another. He looked back to Rogue. The sands both conceal and disclose in their own time, like the swelling waves of a vast liquid ocean rising and falling. Those things caught beneath lie patiently, waiting to be discovered. Rogue interjected. It has many entrances. Sandy nodded. I told you, it hides. It doesn't want to be found. He pulled a small collapsible bladder from his belt and took a drink. Do you have water for a refill? I've got this, said Felth, taking it from the man, and disappearing into the back. Gurinden spoke up, looking toward Sandy. He's a little rough, but if anyone knows where this place is, my money is on him. Rogue leaned to his right, unlocking a small box on the console. He reached in and pulled out a small wrapped parcel which he then placed in Gurinden's hand. I think this should catch us up on what we owe you. The Kubas eyed the unmistakable package of wrapped spice sticks in his palm. Felth reappeared, handing the container back to Sandy and taking a seat behind the holonet console. Thank you. Oh, it's cold too. Sandy looked gratefully over to Felth, then back to Rogue. I am at your disposal. When do we leave? Rogue nodded. At first light. We were planning on leaving tonight, and get some traveling done when it's cooler, but we've had reports of increased Tuscan activity once the suns go down, at least around here. Felth will be airlifting us to a point out of the city, at the edge of the Dune Sea. We'll leave from there. Maybe when we get out a bit we can switch to nights. Gurinden jumped in as he turned to the front door. I must leave now to bring your pack animals around back and ready them. Rogue nodded as the snitched through the front door. As he exited, Holder stepped in, pulling back his hood. Drag. ETZ and I entered from the back with a crate. ETZ released the crate. Turning to face the commando. Hey Holder, you feeling any better? He nodded once. Yeah, much better. Rogue flicked his eyes to Holder. Is Doc here already? I was expecting him shortly, but not this soon. Sandy watched with squinting eyes as Holder responded. No, I left last night, wanted some time alone before we left. Doc should be here soon though. You said sundown, right? Rogue nodded. Right. This is Sandy. He'll be our guide for the search. Holder looked at the old man, reaching out a hand. Sandy took it, giving a firm shake, his ancient eyelids trembling a bit. Is it okay if I get him his gear? Asked Holder. Rogue nodded. Sure. Holder led Sandy into the back as Drag. ETZ and I continued loading charged blaster clips into a crate with Tupolev keeping count. When we were done, and had sealed the container, Tupolev turned and handed the page to Rogue for his inventory. He was heading toward the bunk room when Rogue stopped him. Tups, have you seen 4120 or Blade? We almost ready and they not here. He handed the count to Felth. Tupolev stopped. Turning back to reply. No, I haven't seen them. Drag jumped in. 4120s with Gurinden out back in the courtyard harnessing up the earpiece. Blade said he'd be back soon. One last sweep I guess, Rogue nodded. Thinking it over for a moment. Okay, remembering that Blade was going to speak to his shadow, asterisk. Tiny blue sparks popped and fizzled inside 4120's mouth as he quickly re-wrapped the last remaining spice stick in his hand. Several of the EOPIES grunted. One spit into the sand as it shifted its weight on long legs anxiously. Gurinden's eyes, hidden beneath his black goggles, darted from one side of the courtyard to the other as he secured a buckle on the last animal. 4120's eyes rolled back in his head a bit, and he leaned back against the half-wall of the loading dock, savoring the strong flavor on his tongue and the rush as a wave of chills swept over him. His heart began beating a bit faster and the intolerable itching at his wrist began to slowly subside. The cloaked snitch took a handful of credits and passed him 2 more darkly wrapped packages before disappearing into the shadows. 4120 pulled himself together as he stood up straight, stuffing the spice into an empty belt container. As he did, Falker came out of the narrow, side alley into the courtyard. "Hey, see Mon and grab your gear. Rogue just said Doc and his crew are almost here. We've got to figure out a place for them to bed down for the night since our evening departure has been cancelled. How many of them are there? I thought maybe we could put them in." Falker and 4120 headed out through the narrow alley toward the front door, leaving Gurinden behind with the animals. Blade watched silently from the shadows across the courtyard. Even the Kuba's spy didn't notice him. Asterisk. The Emperor sat alone, motionless with eyes closed. He was as still and rigid as the carbonite-entombed captives that populated the macabre garden surrounding him. Behind his closed eyes, a vision began to emerge from the ever-changing clouds that were the future. He saw himself, overseeing a confrontation between Vader and the missing son the Sith Lord sought. The boy in question, Luke Skywalker, snapped at something his father said, attacking in an anger-fueled rage, driving the Dark Lord back. Lightsabers slashed and sizzled as his apprentice stumbled and fell. Luke aggressively took advantage of this, continuing his attack with a flurry of saber hacks, ultimately severing his father's sword hand. He held the tip of his blade to Vader's throat in certain victory as the image began to fade into more clouds. A smile formed on Palpatine's warped face as he realized the potential in Luke as a new apprentice, potential he had once seen in Anakin. He cackled in amusement, his evil laughter echoing off the stony walls, glass floor and carbonite slabs. Everything was proceeding as he had foreseen. Beneath the glass floor of his carbonite garden, 2 royal guards in pressurized breathing suits moved carefully over the rocks and around the scattered bodies of dead Jedi until they were directly beneath the Emperor. One looked up to adjust their position, making sure they could be seen just in front of the throne. When he was sure they were in place, they both knelt with the capsule they carried. On activation, it slid open. The second guard reached in, pulling out an armful of tattered brown cloth. The other guard reached in now, pulling out more brown cloth. Carefully they laid it out on the rocks. Both pieces came together at a clean, burned slice in the center. Once arranged, it was clear that the cloth was in fact 2 halves of a heavy, brown hooded cloak. Although a body had not been recovered, Obi-Wan Kenobi's Jedi robes, collected by the recovery team on board the Death Star, were finally a part of the Emperor's grisly display from the Jedi Purge. It was at that moment that they saw Lord Vader enter the garden above, walk to the spot directly above them, and come to kneel before his master. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Inside the crumbling ruins of the tiny Biomar shrine, backed as far into the corner as he could get. The little blue astromech awaited his master's return. The extended lifeform scanner, slowly turning back and forth above his dome, revealed his master, beyond the stone wall beside him, and several dozen meters below. The shimmering blue of the Tatooine sky would soon fall victim to the ambers and reds of another blazing decline into the black of night. Recalled memories of another night on Tatooine coursed through the little droid's processors. Memories of roaming the empty canyons alone in search of a settlement, vivid memories of descending a sloped stone, right up to the instant the hidden Jawas fired the immobilizing ray at him. His frame shook a bit, and a very slight electronic whimper escaped from somewhere beneath his dome, which now turned nervously, this way and that. If a droid could hope, he was most certainly hoping that Master Luke would return quickly. Far below, his master carefully followed the stony, descending path in the dim light of Obi-Wan Kenobi's youthful image floating above the activated holocron. The young Alliance commander gripped the luminous cube in his right hand. In his left was a small leather pouch of tools from his mentor's home. Kenobi's voice echoed off the walls in the still, quiet air. Continue down this grade and through the opening in the wall ahead. Luke stepped beneath the dark stone arch and through the twisted breach in the downed Biomar starship's wrecked hull into the emptiness of the even darker room beyond. The holocron sensed its proximity to a small metallic trigger placed somewhere among the rocks to the left, just where Ben had left it. The glowing image flickered and fluttered before disappearing, almost immediately replaced with a new and different image of Kenobi. The one that appeared was of a much older Kenobi with white hair and beard, as Luke remembered him. The image smiled. "Hello, Luke. The fact that this recording has been triggered indicates that you have found your way to my training arena." Luke reached down into a calf pocket on his flight suit and removed a rescue flare. He twisted the metal end cap, activating it, and stood up straight, raising the brilliant white light high above his head to get a good look around as Kenobi continued. "I converted this wrecked cargo bay into an instructional space many years ago, when you were still a toddler. I did so with the hope that someday your uncle would allow me to train you as a Jedi. With each passing year, that possibility decreased exponentially as his dislike for, and mistrust of me grew. I will also assume that since my marker triggered this particular recording, and that the holocron has led you here and not me personally. I am gone. Consider this place an extension of my home and the cave. All three are yours to do with as you see fit. Take notice of the cables overhead for balance training. The trees positioned around the arena are Bafor trees." Luke moved the flare to one side and the other, revealing the trees suspended around the room. Within their branches live Asalamari, small creatures that not only shroud themselves and the trees from the Force, they also create an area surrounding themselves that is a deadened zone, where the Force is not rippled or disturbed, effectively concealing a meditating or practicing Jedi within this ring from unwanted detection by others. Luke glanced around the room at the trees as the holo continued. On the bench to your left are several lightsabers for training. Any one of these should yield parts useful for repairing a hilt. Luke wedged the flare between the planks of a large crate beside him and stepped over to the waist-high bench, setting down the holocron beside a small blast furnace, some dirty rags, and a piece of folded cloth. Carefully, he unclipped the damaged lightsaber from his belt and placed it gently on the cloth. Silently he unrolled the bag of tools, and reached down to the shelf below for one of the training sabers, carefully laid out on another piece of folded cloth. They were all the same, the simple, tubular hilts nearly smooth except for several small protrusions sticking out as he rolled it over in his hands. The black grips on the trainer were tightly screwed in place to the metallic tube of the nondescript saber. He nodded approvingly as he glanced over to his own weapon with grips that were quite loose and hopelessly askew. As he studied the trainer, he noted that it had no glass eye lens and no bubbled activation stud, only two knurled metallic knobs with inset red buttons like the one found on his hilt and a simple circuit board activation sensor strip, but it looked to be part of the clamping collar. Aside from having a textured band around its center, the clamp was the same as his. There was definitely nothing elegant about it, but he figured it would get the job done if he could simply swap his for this one. He turned to the patiently waiting holographic image of Kenobi and spoke aloud. "Lightsaber repair." Ben's smiling image retracted into the cube, replaced with detailed schematics as Luke grabbed one of the tools from the bag and set to removing the silver screws from the notched grips. Hopefully the repairs wouldn't take very long. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The spiked cleats strapped to Solo's boots dug into the sheer face of the ice wall, and he slammed the pickaxe into the frozen slope, pulling his way up the slick trail toward the mouth of the cave. The rest of the search team was below him, beginning their ascent. Just outside the rough-cut opening ahead he could see several soldiers standing guard with rifles drawn and energized, two facing the room, and two facing in toward him. Behind the guards he made out the figures of Leia and Mon Mothma. Both of their faces wore the pallor of extreme concern and worry as they paced, expectantly awaiting his return. He emerged from the dim passage, breathing heavily from his climb, pulling off his goggles and hood as he stepped into the room. One of the guards shouldered his rifle and offered him a drink of water as he sat down on the idle ice cutter's treads. Leia caught his eye, looking for a clue, anything, and for an instant he returned her worried stare with a solemn one that offered no hope. Mon Mothma also saw his expression as he looked up. She clamped a hand over her mouth and closed her eyes as tears fell, realizing Alia was gone. Han took a breath and began as delicately as he knew how. We followed every path, every corridor down there, and they re-extensive. We killed several of those things, but there was nothing, no sign of her, until we came to the spot where it empties to the outside. There was. He paused a moment, staring off into space at the image of her mangled remains stained across the ice, staring vacantly at him, and now forever imprinted in his memory. There was evidence that she was gone. He looked down at the goggles in his hand as Leia comforted Mon Mothma, helping her from the room toward her quarters. Han exhaled hard. That poor kid didn't have a chance against those things. He watched them disappear into the hallway. Several moments later, the rest of the search team emerged from the cave opening. They silently made their way past him, carrying a black body bag. 2 of the guards followed them out, and 2 remained behind. The Corellian smuggler sat in silence atop the cold tread plates of the ice cutter. All he could see was Alia's dead face, her vacant eyes open and staring up at him. He had seen more than his share of death over the years. Hell, he had looked through the smoke curling from the barrel of his blaster into the dead eyes of many he had helped along their journey to death, but it was always the innocent ones that got to him. The ones in the wrong place at the wrong time. The sound of his heart pounded louder and louder against his eardrums. A group of techs startled him out of his daze as they entered the room, followed by several loader droids. The mechs that brought up the rear were lumbering creations and carried large crates of equipment, panels and electronics for installing a locking power door over the jagged mouth of the cave to keep those creatures out. He stood up, goggles in hand as they set to work sealing the opening. The rear courtyard was now completely submerged in shadow, and Dagan was fuming and muttering under his breath as he stepped from Doc's speeder. "I don't get it, what got us stalled here tonight?" Doc was told to be here by sundown, and we all rushed to get here on time. He checked several straps across their loaded-down supply sled. "It was as much a change for us as for you," I said, watching the heat trails rippling off the speeder's side thrusters as they wound down. "Rogue told us we were leaving tonight, and then suddenly changed his mind based on some information about increased Tusken activity in the area, raiding parties coming in closer and closer every night. He felt, since we were traveling with you civilians, it would be safer to set out at first light." I turned my head back to him. "We're not leaving from here anyway. Our drop ship is going to put us on the ground outside of town, at the edge of the Dune Sea. Our guide, Sandy, says there's a Tusken stronghold not too far out where several bantha herds are known to gather, and thinks that it should be a good place to begin." "Fort Tusken," confirmed Dagan. "I know the place. It dates back about 100 years or so. Some of the settlers from Bestine Township built it and gave the name Fort Tusken to honor the island of Tusken on their homeworld. Bestine IV, a new island in an altogether different sea." "So is that one of the places your team is studying?" I asked. "Yeah," he nodded, "but from the surrounding hills with macros. The Sandpeople guard the place pretty fiercely. It's rumored that in the lower levels it houses a spring-fed pool of water. Whether that's true or not has yet to be proven. You think this place is desolate now? Back when the settlers were still in control of the fort, they were all alone out here. The Sandpeople attacked and raided it relentlessly, eventually earning them the Tusken Raider nickname. Lena knows more about them than I do, though. She was here studying them on her own once before. I'll let her fill you in on the details. I'd probably get them wrong." I stretched my neck to one side and then the other, cracking the stiff vertebrae. "She may be interested in a series of caves we accidentally found out in one of the nearby canyons. They've got burial chambers and cave art from some of the earliest Sandpeople, and structures that predate even them, going back to the Gorfa and Kumamga. At least that's what we were told by some of the local moisture farmers. I'll have to show her and the rest of you sometime, maybe when we get back from our little expedition." Dagan grinned, almost laughing. "Sandy. Are you kidding me? Sandy.